What if there was a podcast that could answer your questions in relation to data and digitalization of the energy sector, a source of information featuring guests from energy utilities, associations, solution providers, and the academia? What if this podcast is already here? It's called Datatopia and will complement Enlit Europe's data series with a focus on topics like ownership, policy, security, new technologies, ethics, and digitalization. If you're interested in these topics, then you're in the right place. Stay tuned.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new Datatopia podcast. My name is Areti Daradimu, and I'll be your host. I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, Mr. Francisco Puente, Director at Escan Energy. Escan is a Spanish company founded in 1986 that offers technical, economic, and financial advice on energy planning, energy efficiency, sustainable energy, and smart grids. Francisco, thank you for joining me in this Datatopia podcast episode on smart metering. And my first question to you is, how do you see the smart metering situation in the EU? From reports that I read, I see that some countries are doing really well, while some haven't even started deployment yet. Is that true? And if so, why?
Good morning, Areti, and thank you for inviting me for this podcast. Yes, the situation in Europe is quite different among the different countries. In general, in the last years, the smart metering installations are developing in all European countries. In most of them, we have a minimum or at least a plan to develop the rollouts, but the situation varies a lot. The reason of this is mainly a political support to the smart metering or the cost-benefit analysis. And I will put a good example comparing two European countries. Mm-hmm. For example, in Italy, there was a strong support, was one of the first countries developing a smart metering in Europe. And they are now in the second stage or in the second phase of the rollouts of smart metering. So they're doing a second rollout of smart metering with more advanced features. If we compare it, for example, with Germany, Germany decided that for smaller consumers, for homes, the smart metering cost benefit was not so good in principle, and that they would better prefer to install a smart meter in larger facilities like shops or industries, and afterwards they will start the rollout for the homes. So this is a very clear picture why two different countries have a different strategy. Other countries like France or the UK or even Spain have strong rollouts. Spain has finalized the rollout last year, but other countries are also doing a strong effort in the rollouts. I think the important issue in the rollouts is that they are not focused only on the technical part of the rollouts, but also on other issues like using the information or updating the electric infrastructure in the different countries. So it's a very wide topic, and I think it's a good point to discuss in this podcast.
Yes, and to be honest, I was reading and I saw that the Netherlands tried to do it mandatory. So they were actually trying to do the deployment mandatory, but they had many issues with consumer associations and they had to stop it. Also, France, I remember reading that at the first deployment of smart metering, they also encountered some issues with consumer associations. And it makes sense because I'm going to divide this in two questions, actually. The first thing is I want to talk about the benefits. And the benefits for a utility are a bit more, it seems, at least at first glance, than that of the consumer. So my question is, what are the benefits for a utility in regards to smart metering? And what are the benefits for society in general? Because right now, at the first glance, consumers might think that, okay, the utility takes all my data, they can use it for various reasons, which you are going to explain to us. But what do I get in return?
Mm-hmm. This is a very good question. And I think the example you use of France, and particularly in the Netherlands, showed that the rollouts cannot be done without counting with the consumers and their representatives. we assessed this point in previous reports in Escan, and we found that it is important that when the governments and the utilities are preparing their plans for smart metering rollouts, they should take in consideration the interest and the needs of the consumers. Because at the end of the day, the data and the information of the consumer is private and is their information. So it shouldn't be used with their consent. In the Netherlands, there was a first mandate to install smart metering without this consideration. And at the end, the Senate decided to stop the rollout until the, you know this,
Yeah,
until the
exactly.
consumer.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with
Exactly.
you. Go on, please.
Yes. Until the consumer organizations decided, and the proposal was that they would be voluntary. And the curious thing in the Netherlands was that more than 90% of the people, when it was voluntary, accepted to have the smart meter with certain conditions. But it was not a matter of not being confident on what would happen with the smart meters, but more on that they should be taken into account. So the consumers should be taken into account since the start.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the benefits, regarding the benefits for the utilities and for the consumers, I agree that clearly the utilities get a benefit, and these benefits are, for example, the better management of the grid, the better understanding of the consumption patterns of their customers, being able to provide other services. So there are many, even more direct invoicing or billing with real information from the consumer and not estimated. And this is a benefit for the utility. Also, it's important to understand that the distribution company usually, sometimes is the supplier, but usually the distribution company is the one that has to do the investment. And this is not a minor issue because the investments are of millions of euros. So at the end of the day, this creates employment, businesses, and of course, it has to be assessed. How is this benefit and the cost? On the side of the consumer, in my opinion, at least they also would get good benefits. One first benefit is that they really know which is their consumption. In fact, every month or even every day, they can know with a smart meter which is their real consumption, and they don't get any invoice estimated. And for me, I think at the end of the month, it's good to know which is your consumption, and your invoice is directly related to your consumption, not to estimations. Another good point for the consumer or benefit is that if the utilities or external services providers, let's say, put into practice or start services where the consumer can see more information about energy efficiency, for example, or information on if they could install renewable energies in their roof, or information on how to reduce the energy consumption or how to buy better equipment more efficient, then if they have some information useful,
Mm-hmm.
and or at no cost, then that is a benefit. But if this doesn't happen, then there is no benefit for the consumer.
Yeah.
So this is also a very important point in the overall cost-benefit assessment. I think you touched two very important points.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. But how secure are they? How secure are these things? How secure is our data? I've read again a lot about smart metering because I'm actually thinking of obtaining one. And one of the problems is that everybody will know when I will be home, when I won't be home, what I'm doing. So there's a matter of that. Security, cybersecurity. What happens if someone breaks into excuse my expression, to a utility? And the third thing that is very important, privacy. Why would I want everybody to know what I'm doing when I'm doing it? And here, before I let you answer my questions, because there were sort of three in one, I need to bring the privacy paradox again, where each and every one of us says, you know what, I want to keep my privacy, I want to keep my data. And then every day that we browse the internet, we accept cookies that totally disregard, totally make our rights, our privacy go away. So yeah. Taking this also into consideration, what would you say about our privacy, our safety?
You're asking me the most difficult questions. But yes, you're right. Privacy is, of course, very, very important. It's a critical issue. I would say that the answer for the privacy, first, about the privacy of the information, is that the utilities should take this into consideration. There is always a national responsible of the data. So in every country, there is a responsible. There's a national responsible and responsible of the data. Usually, at least in most countries, the distribution company is the one who manages the data, or there's a centralized hub. This is more typical in the northern countries where the data is collected. So there is a designated company or organization that is the one responsible for the data. Mm-hmm. And they should secure both things that you mentioned, the privacy of the information, so that nobody can obtain your information without your explicit or the consumer explicit consent. That is one point. And the second one is that they have to secure that there is no data that goes outside the system, that any hacker or anybody can, let's say, access to it. So there are protocols, and there are let's say, specialized organizations working in this. So it's not, I would say, in principle, it's more difficult to attack the smart metering infrastructure than to attack, for example, any smartphone or any computer using Google or other browsers, other information, because there are national responsibles in Europe. If you are talking about smart metering in Europe, there are national responsibles, and in general in Europe, the data and the information is much more, let's say, secured, or there are more protocols to assure that this information is not shared with others. So the data from each consumer in all Europe, this is a directive, has to be, if someone wants to use it, has to be explicitly accepted by the consumer. So only for regulatory or legal issues can be used, this information. So issues that are established in the national regulations, but any other service or any other issue that any other company wants to use your information, or even governments, they have to explicitly ask you to use your information.
Mm-hmm. And you said the magic word there, protocols, because you gave me a very nice assist for my next question, which is what is the need of industry certification programs for ensuring a just and safe exchange of data between devices? And here, I would like to say that we had a webinar on the 31st of August on interoperability, and I learned a lot about protocols and certification. But then I had also a couple of discussions with LoRa Alliance and with GRDF. And there are a lot of protocols, so how do you choose? And second, there are some that are completely free, like WISE, the one that GRDF is promoting and using. Mm-hmm. So I would like your take on this, because this is a little bit confusing.
Yes, yeah. The issue about the protocols is not simple, because there are different protocols for different, let's say, things. Mm-hmm. So there are protocols for, let's say, the communication between the systems, the communication between different parts or different layers of the system as well. So one smart meter provides information, let's say, to a concentrator that aggregates several meters, and then the concentrator sends the information to a database of the company, and the database of the company to the hub. So there are many, let's say, layers of information going from different equipments or systems to others. Mm-hmm. Also, there are some, let's say, needs of interoperability among different manufacturers or protocols, let's say, as well. So, for example, this is an example only, but it's not typical, but it can happen that if I buy a smart meter for my home in Madrid, and I want to use it in another city of Spain or of Europe, at some point and under some conditions, it should be possible to use it under some conditions. This is not possible always, and it's something that is under assessment, because even in Spain, if you go from one area of one distribution company to another, it's not assured that your smart meter can be used in your other home, for example. So it's not simple. There are different alliances or different groups of organizations trying to promote different protocols for different systems. I know, for example, the Prime Alliance or Meters and More, or other, or working on the narrowband. So there are different ones, and the business models are also different. Why? Because some companies, for example, are only distribution companies and they don't manufacture, let's say, the smart meters. But some other companies are also involved in the market of the smart metering, and they try to use their own smart meters, for example. So it's not a simple question. It's a question also that is related to the regulation in Europe and in the other countries outside Europe, because there's a specific regulation on the minimum requirements for the smart meters and their infrastructure. And the answer is quite open, I would say. It's not a simple answer.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered all the questions or not exactly.
You did. You may have generated some more questions, but that would be perhaps for a different podcast that we're going to dedicate on protocols with you, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but in a few days, I mean, next week, you're going to moderate a panel discussion on smart metering, the EU landscape, for Enlit Europe. And I was wondering, as let's say an hors d'oeuvre of that, of what is about to happen, or a sneak peek, a preview, what advice would you give to utilities in regards to their smart metering rollouts?
Well, there are, I think, a few key issues that we touched in this podcast. I think one of them is, if you are starting a rollout, or even if you are preparing a second rollout, the planning and the key features and the key issues that the smart meter should include regarding, for example, what services you will like to give to the consumers, how will be the best infrastructure for your smart meters, how you are going to protect information. So there is a wide number of key issues that all of them should be covered in the, let's say, strategy of the rollout. And this is a very good example is Italy. Italy did a rollout first, and now the second rollout has a fully different strategy, because the market of the smart metering and the general situation of the countries is changing a lot. Just as a brief example, there are going to be many more prosumers in Europe in the coming years. And if you don't consider bidirectional smart meters, for example, or the possibility to upgrade to bidirectional smart meters, you probably will have to change the smart meters in the next 3, 4, 5 years in some areas, because people will start to ask to have the information on the PV production, for example. So consider all the key issues very well. That will be one important issue on the strategy. And maybe a second one will be that the operation and maintenance of the smart meters, so once they are installed and working, the operation and maintenance is also very critical. So you need to assure that the smart meter infrastructure provides exactly what you designed, and also that the possibility of failure is very, very reduced, because otherwise you might have problems with the information which is not accurate, or maybe some smart meters are not providing information and you don't know it, or other possibilities. So the operation and maintenance is also a critical issue. It's not a simple and cheap issue, it's something important. And the management of the electric infrastructure and the data, both issues on the communication, so the 3 issues of the smart metering, is very important. So we have the electrical, the communications, and the data. So there are 3 important different infrastructures within the smart metering. And I would say the third one will be take care of the consumers. The consumers are your customers, but are also people with needs and interests. And I think the experience, and we spoke about the Netherlands, France, and other countries, the experience is that consumers have something to say, and if they are happy, everything works much, much better.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I think that, and I think that especially utilities, but in general, companies in the energy sector are beginning to realize that more and more and have more consumer-centric strategies deployed. So,
Fully agree with you.
yeah. So I'll have one more question for you, the last one, and it comes from the realm of magic. So if there was one thing that you could magically change overnight in the energy sector, and that can be infrastructure, policy, innovation, whatever you want, what would that be?
If I could magically change something, I would say that an important thing to make the market work better would be that the information and the projects on energy are much more transparent and allow people of all different people in the utilities, so professionals from the utilities, consumers without experience, so much experience in energy, energy communities, governments. So have a better understanding of the energy market, better share of the information, and decide together the best strategy for Europe. I think the European Commission is doing a good work with the different policies like the clean energy packages, the clean strategies. But also, I think going below the European Commission, going to the nations with their national energy and climate plans and below, I think not everybody is engaged with the energy. And I think we should, to some extent, if I would have a magic possibility to make that everybody better understands the energy, have the information that they would like to have, not everything for everybody, but what they would like to have, and participate in the market. The participation in the market is more, let's say, democratized and easy for everybody who wants to take part in this market. I think that would be a good issue to improve the energy market around Europe.
I agree, Francisco. This is a really nice wish for a magical change, and I think that events like Enlit Europe can actually work. And I'm not saying that because I work for Enlit Europe. I'm saying that because I truly believe that this type of events can really work as intermediates between the experts and the people, or the experts between them, where they can actually network and discuss and find common solutions. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
Yes, I remember last year in the utility week in Enlit, we had in this issue of the energy and smart metering over 300 people in the room. I remember there was a share of information among very different people in the, not only speakers, but the people in this hub were actively participating with the regulation, people that were just attending the session for understanding better the market, the utilities, the manufacturers. I think this is a very, very important issue because this understanding of the needs of the others and the interest of the others is part of what I mentioned before, that understanding and making it more transparent, and of course providing solutions and businesses, because now we need in Europe to move the economy as well. It's not only a matter of policy or matter only of providing services as such, but also making things work both for the consumer, or for the consumers, for the public bodies, but also for the businesses. This is key as well.
Exactly. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights with us. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Areti, and let's keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I'd like to remind you all that the recording of this episode of the Datatopia podcast and the future and past episodes will be available on demand at the Enlit Europe website. Join us soon for another Datatopia podcast episode, as well as for the second season of the Data Hub series. The first episode is on the 15th of September at 10 Central European Summertime, and will focus on smart metering. Francisco will be our moderator. Thank you again for joining, and until next time, stay safe and have fun.